The core idea of an ARPG is item progression. Your character progression. That's the whole idea with an ARPG game. You grind shit to get better levels, get better gear, better skills, whatever the fuck you have, you know? That's kind of the idea of an ARPG. You're grinding and grinding to become better and better incrementally. And what makes an ARPG game great is when the sense of progression feels good. And the problem is you're grinding often, we are becoming, you know, slaves to the meta game. So you see people running normal dungeons for optimal leveling and all that shit. And that's just the gaming industry these days. And that's fine. But it also presents a new problem for game developers to now suddenly be in a position where they have to create distractions that is distracting you for that you're doing the same thing over and over again. Now, I'm going to reference Path of Exile, and the main reason they're doing it so well is obviously because they have literally a freaking decade of content behind them, allowing them to have so much fleshed out content that allows you to have so many different mechanics and end-game content to engage with that distracts you from doing the same thing over and over again. That's one of the main reasons why Path of Exile is such a fucking good game that you can play for 2-3 months before you're bored. You can do that, not necessarily have to, or not, and not something that everyone can, but most people are going to be able to do such a thing. That's impossible with Diablo 4. So the problem with the current structure of itemization in Diablo 4 is very straightforward. Modifiers are kind of so-so. The crit vuln change was initially a good change. The problem is, because of them becoming additive modifiers, you either end up stacking certain mods to weave in collaboration, like double or triple dipping, like Sorks with the elemental dipping. I don't remember which item it is. There's one item, right, Bone Spear, Deathless Visage, for example, gives 5% multiplicative damage scaling on the echo on the bone shards based off, I believe it's 5% multiplicative damage for every 30% crit multi, which means that you're still stacking crit multi, which is an additive damage modifier, but you do benefit from a double dip effect from that item. So essentially, you are either, in specific cases, still stacking one modifier, because it's then going to be higher valued compared to other type of modifiers. But if you don't have that modifier or that type of scaling, suddenly you're going to be in a position where crit strike chance is often still really fucking good, but all the other modifiers that you're scaling becomes additive, which means that you don't care if you have crit, you don't care if you have vuln, you don't care if it's physical damage or shadow, whatever the element you're using, right? Because you're only going to be looking at whichever has the highest numerical value. So it becomes homogeneous, right? And it's just boring. Itemization structure is now extremely boring when it comes to the modifiers. On top of the fact that you have these stupid modifiers like damage to close, damage to distant, damage to enemies affected by shadow dot, and all this. Like, it's just odd. At the same time, you don't have any access to a reasonable type. I don't even want to say there's a crafting system. There is no crafting system in Diablo 4. Right? So there's that big problem as well on top of the enchant system. So it's a very poor itemization structure. But you have another problem with this game. It's very similar to, well, every RPG has this kind of feature. You play the game to a certain level, and then for you to be able to handle the next type of content or the next block or next wall you hit of content you can't do, you have to increase your character's power, and you can do so through 2 or 3 different things. In PoE, you have skill gems or sockets or links. You have gear, and you have skill tree points, which is coming from levels. In Diablo, you have gear and levels, right? Well, Paragon, right? Paragon glyphs will be part of that, I guess. So the thing is with that is that you need to reach certain thresholds to handle the next type of content. So when you go from world tier 1 or 2 up to 3, the initial step is, I gotta get myself some fucking sacred gear. The main source of damage 99% of the builds are using is your weapon. So what happens when you go into World Tier 3 is you want to get Sacred Gear ASAP, and then once you have Sacred Gear, content goes from, oh, this was really tough when I started, to now I'm just steamrolling the entire fucking world. Same thing when you go from 3 to 4, now it's like, yo, I gotta get Ancestral Gear. In PoE, it's like, yo, I gotta upgrade my character, maybe get another link to my skills, or, you know, whatever, get some extra levels before I can do Shaper, Eater World, Searing Exarch, all those bosses. But to keep the topic within in Diablo 4, the itemization structure problem actually is such a weird decision, because they made such a good decision when they changed it so that item level of drops you get has a minimum item level is increased depending on the type of level. Is that it? That's it, right? That's it, right? Sorry. That's it. Nice. Okay. We end up in a position where clip it, please. The itemization structure in terms of item power, the harder content you do, the better drops your, the higher chance you have of getting the higher item levels, because the higher the cap is increased and the low end floor is increased as well, which gives you the sense of you actually progressing your gear. Now, some people don't like that. I'm a big fan of it, because it means that the harder content I do, the higher the probability is that I'm going to update and change my gear. Now, in this game, that means I have to also find new fucking legendaries to put the powers on. I don't mind that too much, but it is somewhat of a problem in some cases. However, the progression, or rather the sense of progression, has been made so fucking well because of that decision. And I was so happy to hear it. And then they just turned around and fucked it all up. All right? They fucked it all up. Very simple. Come here into my cabin. I'm going to talk about this for a while. You see, the thing is, when you're in a position where you increase the floor with the harder content you do, and you increase the ceiling the harder content you do, you will then, as you progress the game, end up getting more and more higher likelihood of finding upgrades. Biggest source of upgrade is your weapon. So the thing is with the item power is that in some cases, some items like rings, amulet, and whatnot, specifically those pieces, care more about the modifiers than the actual item power and the implicit values. Whereas the other gear pieces means that you get more armor. But most importantly, item power is directly associated with certain modifiers, such as life modifiers, armor modifiers, resistance on jewelries, but most importantly, weapon damage. And the weapon damage is the biggest source of upgrades you have when you go from a higher to higher difficulties. So when you go from a normal into sacred gear in World Tier 3, the first thing you want to find is a sacred fucking weapon. Once you get that, you're going to have a good time. When you go into World Tier 4, get an ancestral weapon, you're going to have a good time. The new roof is 925. Here's the problem. They created a really good base scenario or a baseline that they could work with item power that allows you to have a sense of progression. And then they said, you know what? If you kill a world boss, you're going to drop 925 gear. So what's the first thing you do when you go to World Tier 4? You do a world boss. Any weapon you drop, it doesn't matter if your build would prefer a two-hander, you get a one-hander 925. Most cases, you're going to have over 100 item power higher than whatever you're wearing already. That's it. And you will keep that weapon. There is no reason for you to even care about looting weapons when you're doing Nightmare Dungeons, the Blood Harvest, or Hell types or anything. There's no point, because they have a span of item power they can roll with, which is quite vast. Whereas if you do a world boss, you're going to get some 925s. There you go. That's your gear. Now, I stopped looting weapons when I'm playing the game, unless I'm doing world bosses or endgame bosses. I just don't care about it anymore. I really don't. I like that you can get a higher chance of unique items when you're doing the bosses. That's a great change. And I don't mind that those have higher item level. I don't mind that. But I really wish they would not let world bosses drop weapons. I genuinely think that they should just remove that. If you get a 925 amulet or 925 pair of pants, it's not that big of a deal, because if you find an item that is 925 pair of gloves, but you have one that's like 850, but the 850 has proper mods, you would at every given time take the 850 instead. But the 925 is baseline is better, but you need the mods, right? So if they didn't allow us to get weapons from these bosses, that means that the sense of progression would still exist. Because now the fact is, I stopped looting weapons because you just get them from the world bosses. There's no reason why I would ever care about looting weapons in the maps, because they have like this wide span that they can roll between, whereas the weapons from endgame bosses like 920, 925, nothing will compete with that, ever. I dropped my first sacred item in a world boss in World Tier 3 and never changed it till I did a world boss in World Tier 4. And I never changed that until I dropped another weapon, you guessed it, from a fucking world boss. If they fix that and stop letting weapons drop, I don't mind the 925. They just have to remove weapons from being able to drop from them, because of how valuable item power is when it's associated to the damage, and how valuable and big factor weapons plays in your character's progression. it was like I got my weapons, and then my sense of gear progression just kind of went boring after that. And I think that's a huge problem when it comes to the sense of me building my character up. And this is obviously not including other factors that I think is a problem, where I think that it would be wise if Blizzard stayed on top of things like having fixes to bugs and glitches, or overpowered broken things, like barb builds one-shotting things, rogue builds doing one-shotting endgame bosses, or the broken builds like the ball lightning sorcerer right now. I think that they need to attend to those things as well. And at the same time, if they do those things and then also not make content harder, but rather introduce content that is hilariously hard and then nerf that if they have to. They have to do that route, not the other way around. People will be pissed off if, you know, their friend is playing, killing a boss, and then the patch comes in, and now they can't farm it anymore. Reddit will be on fire. People will complain. It's not going to end well. PoE has done it in the past. It did not end well there, trust me. So I think that's like some of the main things that they should work on and fix, because character progression is tightly connected to itemization, item progression in ARPG games. And with more content, like we see here in Season 2, that allows us to engage with Nightmare Dungeons, the Blood Harvest, the Health Tides, Varshan, Duriel, Grigwar, whatever the fuck you want to do, that allows you to engage with different types of mechanics in the game, which is then distracting you from the fact that in reality, you're actually doing the very definition of insanity. You're doing the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, you see B right now farming 666 fucking cows for something we don't even know if it's going to work. Either way, I'm going to stop this rant. We'll post this on YouTube as well, so leave a comment down below if you guys, what you guys' thoughts on what I just talked about is, and hit the like button, subscribe for more content, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe, keep rocking.